he thinks that it puts him in a spot to be the #1 team. I still think Boston and Philly are still by far better, even with the addition of Kawhi. What are your thoughts?
I don't agree with that at all. I think, number one, Philly's not better. But I think what's going to be interesting about Boston is how all those pieces going to fit together. Just because you're going to have more talent doesn't mean it's all going to work together. Listen, Jaden Tatum had a great year. Same thing with Jaylen Brown. I don't think they're going to be content just standing around watching Kawhi and Gordon Hayward shoot the ball every time and Al Horford. So even though they're going to have more talent, that doesn't mean it's all going to work together. But listen, Toronto is right there with the Celtics and the 76ers. And we got to see how Toronto's new coach is going to do and how much Kawhi is invested. To me, he's the key. He was the second best player in the world 2 or 3 years ago. And if he's all in, Toronto's going to have a hell of a team.
Chuck, Adnan Virk, your third favorite Canadian behind Rod Black and Chris Simpson. I know you just said Toronto is a top 5 city in the world, and you're right about it. I hear these thoughts, Chuck. They say, well, Kawhi doesn't want to go to Toronto. You know this. Once he goes there, he's got a huge chip on his shoulder. He knows what people have said about him. He's not the same guy. And if he does indeed want to go to L.A. a year from now, he's got to go out there and prove he can be a strong player. So I think he's going to be awfully motivated and determined, especially once he finds out what a great city Toronto is.
Well, number one, he's got to play well. If he doesn't show he's 100%, nobody's going to give him a max deal next summer. So he's going to be highly motivated. But the main thing, he's got to play well if he wants that max deal from the Lakers. I hope he stays in Toronto. Adnan, you know, man, I think Toronto, I said top 5, but it's in my top 2. It's just an amazing city. I think Mashai does a fantastic job. And that team is loaded, man. They're better than they were 5 days ago. So I'm really looking forward to see how it all comes together with the new coach.
You know, how do you think that all of this has sort of influenced the way people view Kawhi Leonard? Michelle Beadle, and granted, she is a Spurs fan, but I don't think it was just the people who root for the Spurs who are kind of put off by the way he handled this entire season. How do you think, how is he right now viewed by you and by the people that you talk to?
Well, he went from being the perfect superstar, no drama, probably was the best two-way player in the NBA, to a guy who's like, what the hell is going on with Kawhi? I mean, first of all, I can't remember the last time I heard Kawhi say a word.
Yeah.
That's probably been the most interesting. I hear everybody talking, all these reporters talking about, well, do you get this from Kawhi's camp and this is what's happening with the Spurs? I would love at some point for him to be his own man. He's the most valuable piece out of all of this. When you become a star, you're the most important thing. Forget your agent. Forget everybody else's opinion. You have to be your own person, make your own decisions. And I wish he would forget about his uncle. His uncle didn't ever touch a basketball probably. And the reason Kawhi going to get hundreds of millions of dollars because he's a great, great player. But he's got to be his own man at some point in his life, and that time is now.
Well, let's talk about Carmelo Anthony. So he gets traded to the Hawks. There's zero chance he's going to stay there, and the expectation is he's going to go to Houston. Now, you were a superstar, Charles, so explain the mentality. All of us can easily sit here and say he needs to accept a new role. He needs to accept what he is in the sport at this time. He needs to recognize that if he comes off the bench and provides valuable instant offense for a really good team, he can be a contributing piece to a potential contender, but that he's not going to be a star player on a good team anymore. And it just feels like he's going to have a very hard time accepting and understanding that. Maybe that's a mentality you can understand. Can you explain it to us?
Yeah, actually, I actually know firsthand. Number one, I'm trying to work out a deal with TNT where they give me $30 million to go home.
That's
you know,
what's
money. Interesting, when I couldn't play anymore, I went to Coach Rudy Tomjanovich and asked to come off the bench. You know, I probably played 2 years too long, but when I realized I couldn't play and Kevin Willis was a better player at this stage of his career, I went to Coach Tomjanovich and said, listen, let me come off the bench. And you have to check your ego. Listen, Carmelo is a Hall of Famer, and he's a good guy. But at this stage of his career, he's probably better suited coming off the bench, because if he comes off the bench, I was watching you guys earlier. He can be a Bennett Johnson type guy where he can like, okay, we're putting you in the game, do your thing. Because if you got Paul George, obviously Russ. You got Steven Adams, who I think is underrated. He's at best the fourth best option on the team. So if he could check his ego and come off the bench, I think he'd be better suited at this stage of his career.
That makes sense. Like I went through the same transition as I got older. I was never the player that you were or that he was, but do you think he can handle that? That's the real question. It's not a matter of what's best for him. Do you think he can? And again, we can't speak on him, but the conversation with Houston, a lot of it is like, I've never come off the bench. Is there a starting role for me? Do you think that he'll be able to handle that? And if so, what does that do for Houston? Because they lost Trevor Ariza. They lost Luke Maabute. What does that do? Does that help them? Does that help them? Does that push them over the top of, or keep them in that 1-2 spot with them and the Warriors?
Well, I thought losing Trevor Ariza was a really big deal. I think Trevor Ariza is one of the most underrated players in the NBA. And listen, if he does not accept his role coming off the bench, I really think they will not make the Rockets better. So to answer your question, listen, I don't know what Carmelo's ego is. I don't know what his ego is at this stage of his career, but he's not, listen, nobody's the same guy we were 5, 7, 10 years ago. And if he doesn't accept the role coming off the bench, Houston would not be a good fit for him.